Hello and welcome back to the 80-Hour Developer. In the last video, we wrote our first test. We took a look at some of the tickets that we're creating, and in this video, we're just going to continue on with that. So we're going to start adding additional functionality to our application through not quite test-driven development, but close enough. So some of you who are watching this might have come across the term test-driven development before. This is a process that says before you do any development, you must write a test that fails. Then you write just enough code to make that test pass. And finally, you refactor that code or make the code better if you can. So this is called the red-green refactor cycle. Because when a test fails, you get a red indication on your test failing. When it passes, you get green, and then you can refactor. So this would be red. If I do a composer dump auto load here, and then PF is a shortcut that I put into place for PHP unit filter. So if I run PHP unit, we get green. If I run PF, nothing happens because it expects a test name. So if we'll remember, we have these two tests. So I can do this, PF, only logged in users can see the home page. And we see that that passes, wonderful. But, and we did this in the last video, if I change this so that I'm typing in the wrong word, we get red, okay? Red, green, refactor. So there's not much that I can change here in the code, so we're just going to let it go from there. So what is the next test that we have to write? Or the next piece of functionality? We're going to make sure that a user can create a new ticket. So if you'll recall, the first thing we have to do is to check out the branch for this ticket. Git checkout TI3. Okay, and now we can create our new test about creating tickets. So let's call this a, we'll call it a ticket test. Okay, when we come back in here, well, ticket test. Don't worry about this database transactions for now. I will explain it momentarily, or at least in a future video, as soon as it makes sense to do so. So we're going to write our test. And what's our test? Our test is that a user can create a ticket. So if you'll remember from the Laracasts from Scratch videos, there was a video in there called Introduction to Testing. And in there, Jeff laid out the cycle of writing a test. And sometimes you'll hear it referred to as arrange, act, assert. Sometimes it's given, when, then. However you want to say it, what we do is we set up the world of the test. So given that I have a user and a user creates a ticket, I can see that ticket in the database. Okay, so what we have to think about here is how do we want for this to work? And we'll just write it out in our test. So let's create a user and log that user in. So I know this is something we're going to be doing a lot, so I think that it would make sense to have a little function called login user. And this function doesn't exist yet, so let's create it. And we'll say that it's public. Okay, and what do we want to do? We want to create a user. So if you'll remember about model factories, oops, we can use a format like this, factory with the class, the number of times we want it, and the attributes. So I'm going to come back here. And I want we don't need to have any, we don't need to tell it what we want the name to be. We don't need to tell it what we want the password to be. So we'll say user is factory create user, and we want to acting as is a method that comes with our testing, and basically this says log in the user object that we pass it. So this function here is creating a new user, then logging us in as that user, or telling the system that we've logged in. And now I think that what we want to do is we'll visit, I think what we've said is in our web, yes, that home is where they go after they get logged in. So we'll visit home. So the very first thing I want to do is see, does this work? So I'm going to assert page, cpage is home. Okay, so now let's run this test. And do you see what I did wrong here? I didn't say test user can create a ticket or use the test comment. Okay, so when I run this test, we see it works. So I log in the user, and now I can see that the page is home. Great. So I've got a user. What do I want to do? Well, I think I might want to have a button or a link somewhere on that home page that says create ticket. So let's say we're going to click the button called create ticket. And now what happens when I run this test? Well, it fails. And what's the failure reason? It couldn't find a link with a body name or ID attribute of create ticket. Well, that makes sense. In our home Blade PHP, we don't have anything here that says create a ticket. So let's come over to our tickets test, and we'll log in. And if we'll remember, when I create my database, I have a user created with the password of password. So this is all that we have. So if I want to create a ticket, what do I do? Well, for now, why don't we just do this? Okay, we've got this link here to create ticket, and it takes us to a page called create ticket. Okay, so now if I run this test, I get another error. And this is saying that it can't find the page that I want to go to, which is fair. We don't have a page for that. So we're going to come back here. We're going to say that that will take us to the tickets controller create. Okay, so we're going to make our controller. I'm going to use this -r flag, and that tells Laravel that I want a resourceful controller, and we'll see what that means. So by doing that, I've told Laravel that I want all these methods: the index, create, store, show, edit, update, and destroy. Now I really don't like these, so what we're going to do is just get rid of them. All right, well, I'm just going to get rid of. I'll get rid of the first couple for now. So we're going to create the ticket. What do we want to have happen? Well, for now, I didn't want my test to pass. I'm just going to return hello create ticket. Okay. So my test is passing at this point. So I'm going to go back to my test and write just enough code so that it fails. So after I've clicked on my create ticket, what do I want a ticket to be? Well, I think that a ticket should have a name and a description, and we should probably track who has created that ticket. So let's say we're going to type name into name. Okay, and we'll press a button called Add Ticket. Okay, I think this works for now. I think this would make sense for us to start adding in tickets. Okay, so now what happens when I run my test? Well, it's going to fail, and it fails because there's nowhere in there to type in name. In fact, we don't even have a page yet for our tickets. So let's do this. Return view. Which means that we have to go into our views, and I'm going to create a file called tickets view blade PHP. Now, I have another live template that I've typed into BL, and what that does is it has all of this code here. It extends the app, it creates my content section, then it creates a script section down here. So this means I can immediately just start typing in my code. H1 create ticket. So let's go back here and see what we've actually done with this. When I click on create ticket now, I'm taken to my create ticket page. And it tells me that it can't find that view. So it's looking for view, tickets, create. And I called it viewblade.php because I'm not very smart. So when I call it createblade.php, oh, and it's saying app is not found because we have a layouts, and this lives in the layouts folder here. In my standard way of doing things, I pull this right out to the views. I don't like having that layouts directory. So now I'm going to move that. And what we're left with is, hopefully, as soon as this is finished moving it, we have this little page here and it just says create ticket. And there's nothing there, which is exactly what we would expect by visiting into our create method. Okay? So, with this being said, what we need to do now is to add in a form that can accept all the information we want to give it. Now, I could just start typing out the HTML to create a form, but as is so often the case in the Laravel world, there is a better way. So what I'm going to do is look up Laravel collective forms. And the good folks at the Laravel Collective have put together just this wonderful collection of templates to make it really easy for us to have forms and HTML and links and everything else that just works so wonderfully. So I'm going to do this, and we're going to come back up here. I'm going to say that I want 5.6. Let's see if this works. Oh, my computer seems to be not really liking the syntax as I'm pasting. Oh, and it's because I'm pasting from here. I see. So what I need to do is just remove all of the formatting there. But finally, we got it to work, and we've got Composer installing our Laravel Collective HTML. So I'm going to pause it while this happens. Okay, so we have installed our Laravel Collective forms, and if you go here, you'll see that this, there's a lot of documentation here. You can take a look at it. But what it allows us to do is something like this, which just makes life so much easier. We don't have to remember to put in the CSRF token. We don't have to think about typing all of the different code pieces for the different form elements. Everything just happens quite easily and naturally for us. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to create a form. And you'll see I've got a live template for this. you should be noticing by this point, I rely on live templates a lot. I can't recommend them highly enough. They just make life so much easier. So I'm going to call this add, let's call it store ticket or tickets store. Okay, and then we'll say add ticket. So what are we going to need in our ticket? Well, we're probably going to need 2 text fields because we said that we want to have one for the ticket name and then one for the description. Now, if we want the description to be to have more space, we can make this a text area instead. So let's take a look at what this gives us. Okay, so we've got our create ticket, we've got our name, so let's call this my first ticket. And description, this is my first ticket. And what do you think happens when I click on add ticket? Now, if you guessed page not found, you were correct. You might remember we don't have anything in our tickets store. So let's go to our web. And we'll have it go to the store method. Okay, and let's actually make this a little more standard. We'll say tickets create. And we'll come back to our tickets test. Okay, so in here, we should be able to do everything in here now, and this test should pass for us. And it does not. Why doesn't it pass? Oh, because it received a status code 404. Okay. So when we come to our tickets controller in our store, let's just do this. Return hello. Oh, and can you guys see what I did wrong here? I said get, but this is a post. Okay, we're posting to tickets store. Still doesn't like it, and this happens a lot in development where we just don't know what the hell is going on. So it told us that it doesn't like line 23. It doesn't like where we're clicking create ticket. So if we go to our home, oh, remember we changed the route, but we did not change it in our HTML. And now our test passes. Wonderful. So what is the final piece of our test that we haven't written the test for yet? That you can see that the ticket is in the database. So let's say we're going to see in the database tickets. And what do we expect to see? We expect to see that we have a ticket with the name of this. So let's create a variable for this. Ticket name. We'll create this variable down here for ticket description. Okay, and so now does our test pass? Of course it doesn't. First it says it doesn't have a tickets table. So what do we need to do? We need to create a migration. Now, before we do this, I'm going to install yet another package. I'm going to install a package called the Way Generator. This is Jeffrey Way's generators package for Laravel. And we're going to come over here. So this is the GitHub page for it. And we are in Laravel. Oh, this brought us to the Laravel 4 generators. No, 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 no. We want the Laravel 5. There we go. So what this is going to allow us to do is to make migrations a little easier from the command line. So let's do this. And I will pause it while this installs. Okay, so now that that's installed, we can do something like this. A make migration schema, create tickets table, And now we can introduce our schema, or what we want to have in that table. So we can say, I want a name that will be a string, and I want a description that will be a text field. Now it's created the migration, and it's going to create a model for us for our tickets. So let's take a look at that migration that we got. Okay, so this has immediately created our tickets table, and it just has a ticket ID, a name, and a description. Okay, so now that we have that, when we come back to our tickets controller, well, we know that we're getting a name and a description from our form, right? So if we don't need to think about validation, if we don't want to worry about that right now, we can very simply do this. Ticket, first or create, name, okay, and this will be the easiest way that we can get this started, and then we'll do a return redirect back. Okay, so what we're saying here is we're going to go into our ticket model, and we're going to tell it that we're not guarding any fields. Guarding means that you can't insert to that field. So sometimes you might want to say that from the controller you can't update the user ID or the password or anything. Typically I do this and I just say that no fields are guarded. I'm confident with myself and my developers and the tests that we're writing that we don't need to put those protections in, but there are some models where it is very useful to have that. This is standard though. Protected guarded is blank. Okay, so now when I run my test, we get an error. What's our error? What doesn't it like? And it's saying, oh, tickets table not found again. Okay, because we haven't done our migration. So now our database has that tickets table. And when I run this test, everything passes. So it's at this point, we're going to finish up this video shortly. There's one last thing I want to show is I use this trait called database transactions. And what this does is it takes basically a snapshot of what your database looks like before it starts running the tests. And after each test is run, it resets your database. So in this case, it's creating our blank database. So if I comment this out and I run this test, now when I go to my tickets table, I'm going to see this ticket that was created. If I run the test again, I'm going to see there was another user created on the login. If I do it again, there's yet another user created on the login. However, if I come back to here and do this, now every time I run the test, doesn't matter how many times I run it, we're still just going to see this one user in the database that gets put there as part of the migration. Okay? So, that was an overview of a few packages that I use to make development easier, a brief discussion of database transactions, and using a test to start driving out the HTML of our page. So we have now successfully said that a user can create a ticket. So what are we going to do? We're going to take a look at, here's all the files that have changed. Okay, and we're going to check out to develop. We're going to merge this in. Finally, we come over to our tickets, and a user can create a new ticket. So that piece of functionality is done. In fact, I think we also got this, that a ticket can have a description. Wonderful. So in the next video, we are going to start looking at some of the security implications. For example, who can see which tickets? Okay, so hope this has been helpful and useful, and especially I hope seeing me fail tests and have to figure out what's going on is a little comforting. I know a lot of times in these videos, everything looks like magic, and it looks like developers know exactly what they're doing at all times, have it all planned out, And that's just not the case, right? You're going to find tests failing that you don't know why. It's one of the reasons to write tests, and it very quickly helps you figure out what the next small piece of code you have to write is. So we're well on our way, and we're going to continue in the next video. Thanks so much, everybody.